Hello, everyone, and a happy new year. I've got a few questions on how I resolved this first tutorial, so I just decided to throw a recording at it. And if we just go down the list here, it says that, this is basically a refresher. We have to use the CSV library for comma-separated values files. And then here we are basically creating a new file, new CSV file. And if I run that, I'm just basically pressing this one, and in Visual Studio Code, I'm doing Shift plus Enter to run the cell. So when I ran this cell here, this file was created, and it's basically the same values that we see over here. So what's happening here, this should be familiar. We are using this with file stream, and we're using this open function where we give it a file name. And we are opening with the write privilege. I'm saying here write like that. And we're going to separate it with a new line with this indicator here. And then we are going to use a csv.writer, and we're going to pass in this file stream. And with this writer class here, we can write our rows. So that's basically how the file is created. Here we are shown some examples on how we can read the file. So we're using the same method, but we are using the R here for read instead of W here for write. And we are opening the file that we just created here. And we are taking this file object and we are putting it inside of our CSV reader. And from that, we can store it as a variable reader. And then we can loop through each line or each row here and just print out the row. So we can see here, we get 11, 3, 1, 6, and 12 because we are printing out the first value of that row. If we would remove and just print it out like this, we would get the entire content of each row. So let's just change this back here. Now, to print more values, we can, of course, grab the first value of each row and the second value. And this here is index 0, and this here is index 1. So we should get here 11 something, tomato, 3 bread, 1 onion, etc. So we're doing the same thing as here above. We're just getting the next value in the row, or this list here. Okay. Here we are just piling on to, the same methods. Here we are printing the entire row. I skipped one section, but here we are basically getting all 3 values, and we're not printing them out as a list like here. We want to grab each value and construct this nice string here. And we don't have to store each value here in a separate variable, but it makes it more readable. But this right here, we could do it like this as well. This is fine. I think I mixed the order. It doesn't really matter. But this here, I kind of like this because when we come back to this code later, it's really easy here when we look at this print statement, what we're printing, some quantity, units of some items. But if I would update it to just say row 0 plus row 2 plus, row 1, then I would need to know the context of the value. So this is fine, but we're still not doing anything new. We're just opening the file again and again and just printing the values out. So at the very end here, we have a task. So it says that the above now starts to read like a shopping list. By processing the context and assigning specific underlying bits of data to specific variables in our own program, we further improved our information. Thus far, we have opened that CSV file for reading on 4 separate occasions. So that's true. We would want to do that. We would like to reduce this number of occasions as much as possible. Each time we read all the data in it. For extremely large data sets, this will be a waste of a lot of time and resources. This is true. Usually, programmers read the needed data into a local structure. An example, a list containing the rows. So this is true. This is good. And then work with it. Once the data is returned or updated as needed, suppose we want to change the entry for bread to no longer be 3 slices, but rather 2 loaves. Can you write the code to do this? Try this below. Okay. Now we can use this code here. So I'm just gonna copy paste it and just change it because we're always doing the same thing. We need to open the file and put it into a variable. But what's happening here is that we are processing the information after we have read the file. So according to this here, we can technically close the file stream once we have gotten the data, but we need to store the data in a list that is accessible outside of this file stream here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new variable just called shopping list and just set it as an empty array like that. Now I can take the contents here of this reader, and instead of looping through each row and doing all of the hard work here, I'm going to put the information into the shopping list. So I'm going to say here, shopping list equals reader. And I think I will probably have to parse it into a list. I'm going to see what happens. So I'm going to throw everything out. And this is basically the only thing that I'm going to do with this file stream here. So if let's see here, print, no, the indentation is not right. I'm using tabs. So I'm just going to fix this here quickly so I don't have any indentation errors. Okay, so I'm going to print this shopping list. And we get some object reference here. We're not getting the actual data. So if I typecast this to a list like that and rerun it, we can see I have the data, but I'm now outside of the file stream. I just open the file, copy paste the file, the contents of the file into in-memory list of the application, and then just close the file. So now I have access to the file here, or the contents of it, and I can do all of my updates, and then later on we can save it back into the file. But then we would need another open statement. But we don't have to keep the file open, we don't have to keep the file in lock while we're doing all of this. So it says here we have to change this entry here. So it's going to be 2 loaves instead of 3 slices. And there are so many ways to do this. First off, we can just go directly into compartment number 2 because I know it's there and just change it. So if I print out my shopping list and the second value, I get the information immediately. So with that, I can say here, shopping list, go into this second compartment. And in that list, because we can see that this right here returns us a list. So I can do this again and say, go into the first compartment here. So it's 0. We always start counting from 0. And I'm going to say, that's going to be 2. And I can do the same here. So 0, 1, 2, go into compartment 2 and say this is loaves. Like that. And this also here should be the string. Oh, like that. Because I can see that it's the string representation of 3 and not the number 3 because of these quotes here. So if I print it out again after doing these changes, you can see before it was 3 bread slices and now we have 2 bread loaves. One way of doing it, usually we don't know that this is exactly at this location. So we would have to do some We have to loop through this list and look for the bread and do the update. So we can do that as well. So I'm just gonna comment this out here. And let's find the bread before we do the changes. So I can say for each row in our shopping list. Like that. And we can ask if the row, that's this row here, compartment 01, if that equals the string bread, we have found the location. So I'm going to say here, print the row before we do any changes. So if I run this, we can see that we found our row. If I change this to something else, we should have no results because the string isn't in our list. Okay. So since I have found my row, I can now do the updates to that row. So I can say row, go into compartment 0 and set it to 2. And row compartment 2, that's going to be loaves. Like that. And if I print out, let's just do this loop here, and then finally at the end, we're going to print the shopping list. So you can see now that our list has been updated and we have 2 breads loaves. So this is probably a more reasonable way of doing it. So we read the file into a local list inside of our application. And then, because this with statement here, it will close the file once it has finished its execution. So we just close the file and we just work on this list here. So I loop through this list, each row, I ask each row, so that's each of these values here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If the value inside of it in compartment 1, so it's this one here, this one here, this one here, if it's equals to bread, then I'm going to change the value in compartment 0 and in compartment 2. So yeah, I mean, after we've done that, we should update our file. And then we, of course, need to open it up again and write into our file or create a new file. But we can basically just grab this one here. So if we're happy with this statement and we have done all of our executions on our shopping list, we can just open up the file again. And this time we're going to write. So I have to change this to a write mode. We're going to keep the same file name, so we're going to overwrite it. And we have from CSV, we have a writer. So instead of a reader here, we have a writer. And we're going to pass in the same file. And we can store that as a variable called writer. Like that. And I think we actually have an example here when we created the file. Yeah, right here. So we can use this writer.writeRow, and I'm just going to try to pass in the entire shopping list, see how that turns out. So instead of passing one value, I'm just going to pass in our shopping list. That's it. Yeah, I'm going to run it. No errors. If I open up my CSV file, we can see that it has updated to 2 bread loaves. And just to confirm, let's change this to 23 or 32 and run it. And now if I look inside, we'll probably have to reopen the file. It did not update. 2 bread loaves. Let's see here. Did I execute it? Okay, I got some error. List index out of range. So probably there's something wrong with my write row function. So I'm going to have to double check that. So what I'm going to do here is just going to go, let's see the file quickly. So I can see that there are some strings here. This is not how it's supposed to look like. So there is some error. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way to the top here, and I'm going to recreate the file and just going to re-execute this cell. So if I do that, close it up, open it up again. Okay. Then let's see this. We will probably have to use. I need a new line, right? So I'm gonna grab this here, and if it doesn't work, I am gonna just go onto Google and ask them for the method of writing a list into a CSV file. I'm gonna try this once. So I execute it, and it says 32, but the file is not like a CSV file. We got this quotes here, and probably we will have this error if I run it twice. Yeah. Okay. So we're just going to go to Google and say Python write list to CSV. And Stack Overflow here. CSV writer.write row. Okay, so they have here some sort of list, like we do. Probably going to have to write each row into the file. I can see that here it doesn't have a list of lists. And I can see that also that the function that we were using was write row, so single row. So I think perhaps that might fix it for us. I'm going to try that first. Yeah, for each item. Okay, let's try to loop through the file and write it. So here, instead of doing like that, we're going to do the same method as it was created. So same as here, but we're just going to use a loop. So let's toss this out and say for row in shopping list. And we're going to say that writer.write rows. Oh, we actually have a plural here function. Maybe I was just using. I will want to try that first. Writer.write rows and send in our shopping list. Let's try that, but first let's make sure that we have a correct list here to start with. Okay, this looks good. I'm going to go here, execute this. Ah, yes. Okay, so it was a wrong function. I was using the single row instead of plural rows. So yeah, that's it. So I can change this back to 2, run it again, and we have 2. All right, so that was it. Thank you.